let's just dive right in. I mean, you know, when you think about the early days of our childhood, obviously the theme of both this publication as well as this event is success. You know, when we were kids, how did you define success when you thought about your life ahead?
Oh, okay. He's going to be good at this. When we were kids, we moved, when our parents had me, I was the oldest and I was the mistake. And they couldn't even afford to live together at the time. But by the time we were 7, they were able to move us to a really nice suburb so we can go to one of the best public school systems in the country. And I remember seeing kids who had a lot more than us, and some had, you know, a lot less than us. And you start to get this in a capitalistic society, this idea of wealth. And I asked my dad, are we rich? And my dad said, yes. And I was like, really? And he goes, well, as long as you have love from your family, you're always rich. And so that was my first kind of idea. And then by meeting kids who had trust funds and extreme wealth, to, you know, my 2 best friends who were Colombian immigrants whose dad, you know, drove the cab and their mom was the, you know, a housekeeper, I got to see that the majority of my friends who had a family that I wanted to be around weren't the ones with the financial wealth. Most of my friends with the financial wealth were the ones wanting to come to our house or other friends' house because their dad or mom wasn't around. And I made a commitment. I actually spoke at a Goldman Sachs thing last year, and I said it's actually, you know, most of the kids who have parents working at this place that were screwed up. So I challenge you guys, instead of making the big deal, the biggest thing you're ever going to do in your life is raise your kids. So I guess my definition of success is what I'm finally having now in my life, which is, you know, you're blessed to have my niece and nephew, and I have a 2.5-year-old and a 9-month-old, my wife, and that's the most successful thing I've ever done.
So, you know, one of the things when I think back to like family trips, right?
Is me hitting you.
I'll lay the scene for everybody in the audience. We would go to wherever we went to, right? And inevitably, you know, our dad would go and like play sports, and our mom would go do something, and you know,
her mom would go do something.
Yeah, she'd read a book. Remember, my mom's a big reader. And just so you guys know, I still call him Scott, and so I'll refer to him as Scott rather than Scooter on
my birth
on
name.
Let's
do it.
So Scott and I would go and like meet other kids, and our sister would join us. And inevitably, in the first, you know, 4 to 5 minutes, it would just become clear that everybody knew Scott, and Scott knew everybody. And so, you know, one thing that I've been fortunate to see across the course of my life is, you know, you are blessed with this incredible gift for being able to read a room and just naturally build honest and authentic relationships with people. And if you had to drill into, like, how do you think that develops? Why do you think you have that ability that I've never seen in any other person to the extent that you possess it?
So I was a 4'11" freshman in high school. I grew 12 inches in high school. So I was always really small. People thought we were twins, or he might be my older brother.
It was great. It was absolutely great.
But I always kind of put myself in other people's shoes. If I went to see a comedy, I didn't really enjoy the comedy unless I was looking at you and seeing if you were laughing. So whether it be, you know, going online and having to think, what is a 15-year-old girl like for, you know, marketing Justin Bieber, or switching over, you know, to figuring out what, you know, is the Kanye fan thinking, or, you know, why would a show like Scorpion work? I think I've always had this ability of kind of feeling what other people feel, and I always kind of tell my staff when we talk about it, I said, my gift is being extremely ordinary. You know, I've always found myself to be very, you know, the opposite of special. So if I feel something, I assume someone else feels it, because I don't think extraordinary. I think like the masses, and I can put myself in other people's shoes. So I think that's actually the gift. It's, you know, extraordinary people think in extraordinary ways. I think like an ordinary person. The only difference was, before we went to sleep every single night since we were a kid, our dad always would tell us Brauns are different. every single night. I don't know when it started because it started so early. I'm now doing it with my son who's 2.5 and my 9-month-old. And I remember we used to stay up and be like, all right, Dad, whatever, Brauns are different. And then he'd explain to us, it doesn't make you better than anybody, but I think you're extraordinary, so I'm going to hold you to extraordinary standards. And I think over time, we started to believe that. We thought we could do anything. You know, we truly thought we were equal to anybody. If you could do it, why can't we? And so that gift of kind of just understanding the common man, because I was the common man. The only difference was I believed that I could do irrational things in my life. And, you know, I've heard from friends, and one of my friends said, he was like, nothing rational ever became great. It's the irrational ideas that become great. And it was this extreme belief of why not, combined with the talent that no one else in the world has, only me, according to my brother, of being able to put myself in people's shoes.
And, I mean, I remember like a big moment for you in the earlier parts of your career was when in a magazine, Creative Loafing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like when Scott was in Atlanta, this major article came out that profiled him, and it was really complimentary, and it talked about the rise of his career. And there was an interview with some major artist at the time who described you as having concentrated hustle. And what do you think that motivation to succeed comes from, and do you think it's nature or nurture?
I think a part of it was responsibility. Our grandparents on our dad's side are survivors of the concentration camps. Our grandmother was in Auschwitz and our grandfather was in Dachau. And on my mom's side, her dad died when she was 11 years old pretty suddenly, and she grew up with nothing. So here we were with, you know, two parents who were dentists with giving us an opportunity, and there was a meal on the table, and, you know, we had means. And I just felt this guilt of being a first generation. There wasn't a trust fund, but I knew everything was taken care of. And I felt this extreme guilt. It's actually why I went to Atlanta, changed my name to Scooter, and said I was from my dad's neighborhood in Queens, because I was embarrassed of saying where I was from. And at first it was that, then it was a combination of just this extreme fear of failure, that I wanted to live up to what people thought of me, and I wanted to succeed. And then once you got a level of success, you'd get an identity within that success, and you didn't want to let go of that identity, so you keep building on top of it. Then I had my children, and I had this this epiphany. When you make life, you understand death for the first time. And for anyone who has a child, they'll understand that. And those of you who don't, it's an amazing thing when it takes place. But you're holding someone, and you're like, why do I love this person more than anything I've ever loved before? But I don't know them, and they don't know me, and I've worked really hard for a long time to be the person I am in the world, and they know nothing about it. And then you understand that they didn't exist, and someday you won't either. And your entire purpose in life becomes, you know, that you need to put as much of your influence into the world, the best parts of you into the world as possible before you go, because no one's going to remember you. In 100 years, I don't care if I achieve everything in the world, no one's going to remember me in 100 years, there'll be someone else. And that's fine, I'll be dead. But I want to leave an influence on the world when I go that I know that you might not know me, but I did something that affected the world in a positive way. So when I looked at where's that coming from, to answer his question the most roundabout way possible, I finally identified that I have a drive from insult. When people tell me I can't do something, I think it's the short 4'11" guy in me who played basketball, and they said you're too small to play in this game. Something takes over where I just want to go after it with reckless abandon because I want to prove that I can do something. I like the challenge. I don't like, you know, an 80 or 90% chance of success. That sucks. Everyone can do it. It's boring. I want the 0.0001% chance of success, because then when you win, it's an incredible feeling. So I want people to tell me I can't do something, and then I get excited. It's actually, I've realized the majority of the most pivotal moments in my life are people telling me I can't do something. My wife, I should not have been able to pull her. I went after that. I was like, I'm going to marry her because she's just far out of my league. And now we have 2 babies, and she's going to have a hard time leaving me.
Um, so, so, as you started to become your own person in the world, call it, those formative years, teenage, 20s, are there any books that really profoundly impacted you, and how so?
I know what you're doing there. That's good.
Yeah.
A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a very important book in my life that I read. Actually, was recommended by you. The Operator about David Geffen. He hates the book. Please don't put out there into the internet world that I suggested this book, because my hero has now become my mentor, and I don't want to say it, but that book changed my life. I read about David, and I just thought, here's this guy with nothing in the mailroom who became the most powerful, incredible, person in the entertainment industry. And I remember I was 19 years old in a dorm room reading that book, and I remember the page that changed my life. John Lennon was having a solo career, and everyone was trying to sign John Lennon. And I'm literally in my room screaming at the book, go to Yoko Ono. Don't go through his manager. Don't go through this. Like, go to Yoko Ono. She has the influence. And I turned the page, and David was the only person who went to Yoko Ono and signed John Lennon for his solo career. And I was like, I can do this. And and I also like David because I was a fanatical Superman fan since we were kids. And as I got older, I realized I wasn't Superman. I started to realize that although I love basketball, God didn't bless me with NBA size or skill. And although I love Michael Jackson, although my dance moves are nice, my singing voice wasn't there. But the dance moves we were ready, guys. We were ready. And David was Batman. He was the human superhero to me. He was someone who wasn't born with these superpowers, but was able to figure it out. And that book changed my life.
So you include an element of philanthropy in everything that you do at your company, SB Projects, and you encourage your artists that you manage to do the same. Why?
Our mom. We were Jews, so we weren't celebrating Christmas, but she would take us to, a soup kitchen to serve people. She, on Hanukkah, would make us choose one present one day, and we'd have to choose a charity to give the next day and switch on and off. And when I started throwing parties, she couldn't really understand what was going on. And I promised her every fourth party I'd give it all to charity. And I kept that going. We became the largest college party promotion company in the country pretty quickly. Gave a lot of money to a lot of different charities. And when I started working with Jermaine Dupri at SOSADEF, I was 20 years old. I was a vice president at 20. And I tried to institute different things, was doing it from there, still throwing my parties. And when I finally started my own company at 24 years old, I made a promise to myself that everything I would do would include a charitable component. And my brother came to me and he said, look, it's actually, well, you could say it's your idea. Why don't you explain to them what happens statistically?
Oh, you go
Okay,
ahead.
well, any for-profit business that has a non-profit component statistically does better. People will support you if they know that you're giving back. And that is a fact. And my brother introduced that fact into my life. Also teaching me that we were never going to call nonprofits anything but for-purpose from now on. They're not nonprofits, they're for-purpose companies. That's something that my brother came up with that I like also. And I went to my artists and I said, look, this is something that's important to me. Can we give a portion of every ticket sold at every concert we do to charity? And I've never had one artist say no, ever. We've donated millions to plenty of different charities. Between our artists, we're the #1 Make-A-Wish giver of any management company in the world. And we've supported Adam's charity and built a tremendous amount of schools together. And I think if you give people an opportunity to do good, they'll choose to do good. And I think my industry, you think of it as kind of disgusting and, sharks and snakes everywhere. And I think that's true. There's definitely a lot of bad people. But I think, like in our country right now, there are a lot more good people. There's just a lot of bad people being really loud. So that's the end of that answer.
Thank you. So last night, I was on Instagram, and your wife Yale has a new show on Facebook Watch through her company Mother Lucker. And there's multiple short clips of various couples speaking about their pregnancy-related experience. And as I'm watching it, I see my brother say to the camera, the first person I told about the pregnancy of my second child was Kanye West. So I want to know, as your brother,
It's not.
what the hell?
You feel the same way? My other brother's here too, so there's 5 of us in our family. Okay, no, it's actually not busted. It's a good story. I was on the phone. So I manage Kanye, and I was on the phone with Kanye having a conversation. And as I'm having a conversation, my wife's trying to get my attention with, and we had just put our son to bed. And I'm like trying to finish the conversation, and she's like, I gotta talk to you. And I was like, give me 2 seconds. And she's like, and I went, you're pregnant? And he went, who's pregnant? And I said, my wife's pregnant, I just found out. And he goes, that's amazing. And then he goes, wait a second, like just now? And I was like, yeah, just now. And he goes, am I the first person to know? I was like, yeah. And he's like, that's amazing. And we were at a point we couldn't tell people yet. And then I was like, so yes, technically, I'm gonna give him a pair of Yeezys, like, it'll be cool. But yes, he's a Kanye West baby. That's
if you guys have one more, I better find out before Kanye West. That's
yeah, that is fair. That is fair.
Let's flip.
But how cool is that? Like the first person who finds out in the world, like you're gonna tell somebody, Adam, you're cool and everything, but you're not Kanye. You didn't make College Dropout. I love you, but like.
So what is something in general that scares you?
Oh man, you're going deep, especially on this week. So I'm not going to get emotional. I'm just going to tell the story. This week I've been one of my artists, Ariana Grande, had a terrorist attack at her show. It was in Manchester. I'm sure you guys have heard about it at this point. And I worked very hard, and I threw on a small Italian girl's shoulders the burden of doing a show 2 weeks later. At first, we weren't going to do it. Then she came to me and she said, okay, what's your idea again? I need to do something. Otherwise, these people died in vain. And she stepped up in a way that for the rest of my life, I'll always respect her, and everyone else should too, because what she did is she changed the narrative for all those families. And I met those families, and that was an amazing thing. Afterwards, we actually met those families, of the victims, one by one for 10 minutes each, she and I. That wasn't something we did publicly, it was something we did in private. And I got to look those people in the eye and realize that as much as we're doing a great thing and people clap, good job Manchester, thank you, their lives are changed forever. They don't have mom coming home. They don't have dad coming home. They don't have their son or their daughter or their friend. They're gone forever. And that idea that, you're not there when you could be there is my biggest fear. Is I feel an absolute responsibility to step up for my fellow man and woman and do something with this platform I've been giving, because I feel like if I don't do it, my platform will get taken away. I don't think, I'm a spiritual person, I think God gives you blessings to give other people blessings. And but my biggest fear, without getting emotional, is I've missed putting my son to bed almost every day this week. And something I do, I'll go and I'll work late night, and I'll say to my wife, I'm coming, put the kids to sleep, and then I'll leave if I have to, and she's incredibly understanding. But a lot of times I stay home until she passes out, and then I go to work all night if I have to. But this week, I'm missing my kids. And what I don't want to be is that dad I described in the beginning, that I give myself and as much of my effort to the world, and it looks great, but I'm messing up at home. So my biggest fear is I need to figure out that balance.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how do you make that decision? Like, what is that mental and emotional calculus when you know that you could be putting Jagger down to bed, but you could also be on a phone call, you're needed on a flight to be with an artist somewhere, what is the threshold at which you make a commitment to go in one direction versus the other?
I'll choose my kids over my artists any day. And if any of my artists have a problem with that, then they shouldn't work with me. And I think the artists that I work with, they know I look at them like family, and I will always be there for them like family as long as I can. And I think if they're my family, they'll respect what I just said, and I think most of my artists do. I just have to believe that when my boys grow up, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna figure out that balance. But I also think being home with them all the time isn't the best thing for them. I think they should see that their dad goes to work and works really hard with purpose. And what I will make sure is whenever they call me, I call them right back or I pick up the phone. Because my dad did that for me, and my mom did that for me. And I want them to know how important they are in my life, but I also feel like if I'm helping people, that teaches them to help people. So I'm still figuring it out. I'm a work in progress.
You know, you live a very public life, right? You have millions of followers on Instagram, on Twitter, etc. You're associated with all these artists that live even more public lives. How do you decide where you draw the line between your public and your private life? And I'm sure a lot of people in here are leading amazing companies, organizations, and they have to make the same decision too. And so how do you think about it, and how would you advise anyone here?
We decided with our children, we didn't want to put them on social media at all. And for the first year of our son Jagger's life, we never had him on. And then we started going to like some of my artist concerts, and kids are like, "Oh my God, there they are!" And next thing you know, we'd see like pictures of our kids online. So we decided the first year is ours. The first year we don't put our children on. Like that first year is just us. And then after that, if we want to put pictures up, the world has changed. I'd rather people know that they're the majority of my life than not know. And that's something I wrestle with. My mentor yells at me all the time, "You shouldn't be putting your kids up." But the way I also look at it is, I'm going to protect my family from bad people. I'll figure that out. But when I came into my industry, the stigma was fast cars, fast women. That's what a male executive in the entertainment business was. And then I found out Richard Branson, who I thought of as like James Bond with tons of women, has actually been faithfully married for 38 years and has 2 children that he loves and grandchildren, and is this amazing entrepreneur who's also an amazing family man. And then I found out that Jeffrey Katzenberg is an incredible family man. I didn't know that about these guys because no one advertises it. So I just decided I want to change that. So I decided I'm going to start showing my family life as much as my business life, because that's more important. People should come into the business and not want to be a sleazebag.
So when's the last time that you feel like you really stepped outside of your comfort zone?
I went to Burning Man.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I went to Burning Man. I mean, you're not supposed to talk about it, I don't think. But I've said no to a friend for like 6 years straight and going to Burning Man. And I was like, I'm not going to Burning Man. Like, I don't do drugs, so I'm not going to Burning Man. And finally, a buddy of mine got me to go. I actually don't want to tell you guys because I don't want you to go. I want it just to stay the way it was. Look, at the end of the day, I went out there, and my friend convinced me, and I was actually starting to work on the benefit. And I was like, I can't go now. I had another excuse. And my wife was worried about me because of the Manchester thing, and she wasn't really sure. And she said, you know what? Your staff says they can handle it. We're just going for 2 days. You can go. And I went to a community where a city shows up in the middle of the desert. And people are not spending money, and they're taking care of each other, and they're giving each other, you know, food and drink and saying hello. And some people are naked, and that's their thing. And we grew up around a park named Bible Street Park in Coscob, Connecticut, and I used to ride my bike like a wild man. And I'm 36 years old, and I was 15 again because I was riding my bike around that playa like a damn wild man. So much so that in my mind it was an electric bike, and the next day I woke up like not being able to move, realizing I had pedaled all of that. But it was also the first time, because there is no reception there, it is the first time in over 10 years that I did not have a phone for 48 hours. And I've been good about, my phone down, or that. I had no phone. In fact, I gave it to my wife. I said, not even pictures, just take it away from me for 2 days. I made a commitment to myself, I'm going to do this. And 2 things happened. One, I met me again. You know, I got to reset and have the strength to come back and work even harder, because you can lead, but if you're weak, you can't really lead. And the other thing that really was great is we've been parents for 2.5 years. And I think for any of you in a relationship, you know when the kids come, it's really tough on a relationship. Like, the kids come first, and it's hard. Marriage is hard. It's work. But I think for me and my wife, it was a really great thing because we dated. Like, for 2 days, we weren't parents. We were just us. And it might sound selfish for those of you who don't have kids. Like, it's actually really important in any marriage that you find time to just be you. Otherwise, it's a mentor of mine, I won't say who, said to me, sign your wife. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, someone should have told me this a long time ago, sign your wife. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, when you have a client or a deal that you're chasing, you will give up everything to get that deal done. You will wine and dine. You will put it all into it because you want to get it done. You want to sign it. But once you have your wife or your husband, time goes by and you kind of just, oh, you want to come out for dinner? No, I'm going to watch the game. Oh, this show. Like, you kind of just sit next to each other and you don't sign each other. So I actually took his advice, and marriage is still hard, and I love my wife, and it's up and down. That's what marriage is. But I now have this advice. I'm extending it to all you guys. Like, sign your spouse. It's actually worthwhile, and that's what we did at Burning Man. We took the time for each other, and it was great for our relationship. And yeah, that was Burning Man. I didn't think I was going to tell you guys it was Burning Man, but I also wore the craziest outfits. I'm Jewish, so I returned to the desert as Moses.
So, growing up in our house, our mom had certain things framed, right? Like phrases, poems, etc. And there were things that I think stuck with both of us. And when you think about the important phrases or poems or just moments of inspiration that you would want your kids to see on a daily basis, what are those things that you not only think about for your kids, but that you would share with this audience?
One, I would say read Rudyard Kipling's If. Our dad gave us that, put us on our wall. Great poem. Talks about what it takes to be an adult in the world. 2, read Steve Jobs' Here's the Crazy Ones. It's a great one. 3, the Brauns Are Different thing. Like, you start telling your children from the moment they wake up, the moment they go to sleep, that they are extraordinary, they will start to believe you and do extraordinary things. And there was a poem given to me, David Geffen showed me this poem. It's called Ithaca. I named my holding company after it. It's a Greek poem, and it talks about the journey. And it talks about going to the island of Ithaca and all the things that you'll see along the way. And when you finally get to Ithaca, if you find her poor, she would not have fooled you, because now you truly understand what Ithaca really means, which is life is a journey. It goes up and down, but you enjoy it. And then that answers that question, but I do want to do one thing I like to do when I do talks that I've learned from a friend of ours. So answer the question honestly and don't try and be slick, because this goes to this whole definition of success. Raise your hand if I told you I would give you a job for the next year. It would be a horrible job, but you wouldn't have to do anything immoral. It would just be a horrible job, but you would make $1 billion in the next 12 months. Guys, most of you would take $1 billion for like a bad job for 1 year. But so maybe not everyone. Keep your hands raised. Raise your hand if you had $1 billion and someone you loved got sick. Would you spend all $1 billion to save them? Okay. Keep your hands raised. If you got sick, would you spend the $1 billion to save yourself as well? If it wasn't going to go away from your family, family's not affected, just this, you save your life so you can live another day. Who would save themselves? Interesting. Okay. The point is, between those scenarios, everyone in this room is already a billionaire if you have your health and your loved ones. So I learned this from a friend. I wanted to share it with you guys because life is perspective, and I think a lot of people I meet at conferences like this, and when we speak to students, they're trying to figure out how to get to the next thing and how to get to the next thing and how do I get financial gain, and what they're missing is that they're already there. If they were on top of the mountain and they got sick, if you have your health and you have your loved ones, you're playing with house money, and enjoy your life. Work hard, but don't miss out on the things right in front of you.
on that.